Welcome again to the show, Ivan. It's great to have you. I would like to just dive right in. So tell me a little bit, for those tuning into the show, about your entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah. So I started my consulting practice. I was a management consultant back in 1983. And I had gone to a lot of networking organizations, and I'd gone to some that were just incredibly mercenary. I'd go to these meetings and everyone was trying to sell to me, and I felt like I'd been slimed. Needed to go home and get a shower. Then I went to these other groups that were just incredibly social. It was happy hour and hors d'oeuvres, and nobody was even talking business. And I didn't like either of those two. I wanted a network that had a focus on business but wasn't mercenary, and that was relational but wasn't totally social. And the glue that would hold that concept together is our principal core value of giver's gain. This idea that if I help you, you help me, we all do better as a result of it. And so I formed, I talked to some people in December of 1984 about a network like that, and they liked the idea, and I kicked off in January of 1985. And as you mentioned, we now have 9,700 groups in more than 70 countries. Now, I'd like to tell you I had this vision of a global organization, but I just wanted some referrals for my consulting practice.
That is too funny.
Yeah, well, what I discovered was that business people were desperate for referrals. They were hungry for referrals. And we don't teach this in colleges and universities anywhere in the world. It's just not taught.
Right.
And so more and more people asked me to open chapters, the second, the third, the fifth, the 10th. And, we only take one person per profession. So that's why, a chapter can only have dozens of people as a rule. And so it ended up really taking over my consulting business, which I sold in 1989, and really just did B&I full time since then.
Wow. And what helped you, to scale? Because, once you sold your business, you're doing this maybe part or full time, but what helped you to scale it to be global? Or heck, maybe we just start with the state, and then how do you scale that, right?
Yeah. Well, I had really created a plan to scale the business early on. As a matter of fact, absolute truth, middle of 1986, I had 30 chapters after a year and a half. And somebody said to me, how many groups do you think you could eventually have? And I said, I've been looking at it. I've been crunching the numbers. I think someday B&I could have 10,000 chapters. And he laughed and he looked at me and he said, and how many do you have? I said, well, I have 30. And he said, I'll never forget. He looked at me and he said, well, it's very good to have goals, Ivan. Very good to have goals. And I'm like, no, really, I think it's possible. And here we are. We're tickling almost 10,000 chapters. Now, it's taken, over 35 years, but we're tickling 5,000 chapters. 10,000 chapters. So I think I had a plan to scale. And one of the books I read early on in the process was The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. And he talks about, scaling a business and learning how to work on your business, not in your business. And so I used a lot of the strategies from that book, The E-Myth, which stands for the entrepreneurial myth, where, anyone thinks they could be an entrepreneur, but it's a lot harder than they may think. It's easy to produce something. It's hard to manage the production of something. And so I thought that was a great book, and I did a lot of the things that he talked about in there. And I had a plan here's an example of one of the things I did. At the end of the first year, I created an organization chart with 15 different positions. Now, mind you, I only had 2 employees, and both of them were part-time. So I had the equivalent of 1 employee plus me. So I created this org chart with all 15 different boxes, and I put their name in the boxes where they were doing certain things. And they were, each one was doing a couple of different roles. And I put my name in the boxes that I was doing stuff. So they were in 4 boxes. I was in 11. So at the top, it was Ivan Misner, founder and CEO, Ivan Misner, director of marketing, Ivan Misner, complaint department. I swear to you, this was really on it. Ivan Misner, janitor, because I started the business in my house.
I love it.
I started in my home, and I was the guy that took the trash out. So my goal to scale was as I hired somebody for each one of those boxes, I would scratch their name out and my name out, and I would write their name in. And my goal was that within 5 years to be out of all the boxes but one. And I was, after about 5-6 years. Now, what I didn't realize is there were more boxes I hadn't thought of. So I did the exercise.
Sure.
Here's the big mistake I made. For your listeners, for your viewers, I would urge you to try this, do this, but don't do the one thing I regret. I took that document. I was so excited. I crumpled it up and threw it out. And then drew another one. And I hand drew it back then. You couldn't do something like on PowerPoint. They didn't have those kind of software. So if I still had that page, it would be framed and it would be sitting in front of me to this day. So if you do that, save that, because that's part of your vision making to scale your company. Totally. And I hear that from a lot of entrepreneurs is write everything down. Yeah, and that's one of the things that Gerber says is write everything down, create systems.